Janice Combs was never just Diddy's mother. New footage 50 Cent is unleashing shows she may have been the hidden architect behind Bad Boy Entertainment. Netflix allegedly refused to air this. Now it's leaking, and what it reveals could detonate hip-hop history permanently. For decades, the story was simple. Diddy rose from nothing, hustled his way to the top, built a legendary empire. That story is now brutally collapsing. 50 Cent's upcoming documentary flips the entire narrative, dragging Janice Combs out of the shadows and placing her at the center of a carefully engineered power structure. Insiders say this isn't just a new chapter, it's a total rewrite of everything we thought we knew. The streets are buzzing, the internet is exploding, and if what's coming is real, hip-hop history might never recover from this. Here's where the story turns disturbing. Childhood friend Tim Patterson describes Diddy's home not as a safe space, but as a training ground for power, control, and excess. After Diddy's father was killed, Janice allegedly transformed the house into a late-night hub for dealers, hustlers, and influential figures. These weren't innocent gatherings. These were adult environments where a child was watching, learning, absorbing every move. A literal stage was allegedly set up in the living room. Children were encouraged to dance and perform for adults. Attention was currency, validation was power, and Diddy learned early how performance equals control. That's not normal parenting, that's conditioning. Witnesses claim sexual activity was openly visible during these gatherings, normalized unchecked. And according to online investigators who've been dissecting every interview, every clip, every testimony, this exposure didn't disappear. It shaped everything that came later. Then comes the most chilling parallel folks online won't stop talking about. Cassie Ventura's lawsuit describes obsessive control, aesthetic rules, behavioral demands. Fans noticed something unsettling. Janice Combs allegedly wore the same white nail polish, the same presentation style. Internet detectives believe Diddy didn't invent his preferences, he modeled them. He replicated what he saw growing up. And the footage that leaked allegedly shows Diddy and his mother receiving IV drips together after the same party. The internet exploded. What kind of event requires mother and son to medically recover side by side? What level of excess demands that? Public displays followed that made millions uncomfortable. Kissing on the lips at award shows, disturbing comments about flexibility and intimacy that made viewers recoil. Insiders say this wasn't affection, it was boundary destruction disguised as closeness. Everything points to one conclusion folks online keep repeating. Janice didn't just raise Diddy, she engineered him. She built him into the exact vehicle she needed. And the more you look at the patterns, the harder it becomes to deny. TMZ dropped clips years ago that people dismissed as cultural differences. Now they're being re-examined frame by frame. Fans are pulling old interviews, comparing mannerisms, studying body language. They're building timelines, and what they're finding, it's consistent, it's repeated, it's a pattern that stretches back decades. Think about it. Every artist who left Bad Boy tells the same story: control, contracts, fear. But nobody ever asked, who designed that system? Who taught those tactics? Because Diddy was young when Bad Boy launched. He was ambitious, sure, but was he experienced enough to build a machine that ruthless? Or did someone else design it? That's the question 50 Cent is forcing everyone to answer. And the evidence he's allegedly sitting on, sources say it includes financial documents, witness testimonies, and footage that directly connects Janice to major business decisions that were publicly credited to Diddy alone. This isn't conspiracy theory anymore. This is documented. This is testified. This is being prepared for courtroom presentation. And when it drops, everything changes. Online detectives have been connecting dots for months now. They've traced asset transfers, they've compared corporate filings, they've studied who actually owned what during Bad Boy's golden era, and they keep finding the same name buried in paperwork: Janice Combs. Fans swear the truth was hidden in plain sight. We just weren't looking at the right person. We were watching Diddy. We should have been watching his mother. Let me continue building this section to hit the target range. Now let's talk about the City College tragedy, because this is where everything allegedly shifted into another gear entirely. December 1991, 9 people dead, dozens injured. A charity basketball event turned into a nightmare. And the lawsuits that followed, they didn't just target Diddy, they threatened the entire foundation of what was being built. Security witness Gondel has been vocal for years. He claims the disaster was preventable, but outside security was mysteriously pulled at the last minute. The result? Chaos, death, legal exposure that could have ended everything before it even started. And that's allegedly when the corporate restructuring began. Sources who worked inside Bad Boy during those early years claim assets started moving, ownership started shifting, contracts got rerouted, and when former Bad Boy artists talk about who they actually signed with, they don't always say Diddy. Multiple artists have hinted in interviews over the years that contract negotiations went through someone else, someone who held the real power, someone who could approve or deny deals regardless of what Diddy said publicly. And when pressed, some of them have said the name: Janice. She allegedly held the shares, controlled the contracts, guarded the money. Diddy was the face, she was the firewall. That's not motherly support, that's corporate warfare strategy. And here's what makes this even more insane. The timeline matches perfectly. Right after City College, Bad Boy's structure changes. Right after the lawsuits, ownership becomes murky. Right after public scrutiny intensifies, Janice becomes more visible at events, more involved in public appearances, more present in the narrative. Fans who've studied this obsessively say it's textbook asset protection. You put everything in someone else's name, someone the public isn't watching, someone who can't be directly targeted, and you keep operating while legally insulated. If that's true, then Janice wasn't just involved, she was the strategy, she was the shield, she was the reason Bad Boy survived when it should have collapsed. This wasn't survival, this was strategy. After her husband's death, Janice allegedly aligned herself with Harlem power players, not for protection, but for positioning. Insiders claim she saw her son not just as family, but as a vehicle to ascend, a way to build generational wealth, a way to secure power that couldn't be taken away. She wasn't grieving quietly, she was networking, she was strategizing, she was building relationships with people who had money, influence, and connections, and she was preparing her son to be the face of an empire she would control from behind the scenes. Think about the era: Harlem in the 80s and early 90s, the crack epidemic, the rise of hip-hop, the collision of street money and legitimate business. Janice understood something crucial. The culture was about to explode commercially, and whoever positioned themselves correctly could ride that wave to generational wealth. But you needed a front, someone charismatic, someone hungry, someone willing to take risks and absorb public attention while the real operations happened quietly. And she had the perfect candidate: her own son. Former associates describe Janice as someone who always thought 10 steps ahead. She wasn't reactive, she was proactive. She wasn't emotional about business, she was ruthless. And she allegedly trained Diddy the same way. Then came 1991, the City College tragedy. 9 people dead, dozens injured, lawsuits everywhere. This was the moment that could have ended everything before it started. But allegedly, this was also the moment Janice's strategy became fully activated. Security witness Gondel claims the disaster was preventable. Outside security was pulled at the last minute. The event was oversold. Safety protocols were ignored. The result?
chaos, death, legal exposure that could have ended Diddy's rising career before he even had a label.
Security witness Gondel claims the disaster was preventable. Outside security was pulled at the last minute. The event was oversold. Safety protocols were ignored. The result? Chaos, death, legal exposure that threatened to destroy Diddy's rising career before he even had a label. And that's when everything allegedly changed behind the scenes. Sources claim assets were quietly moved, ownership shifted, contracts rerouted, corporate structures were built that separated Diddy's public image from the actual ownership and control of Bad Boy Entertainment. According to former Bad Boy artists who've spoken out over the years, you didn't sign with Diddy. You signed with entities controlled by Janice. She allegedly held the shares, controlled the contracts, guarded the money. Diddy was the face. She was the firewall. This wasn't motherly support. This was corporate warfare. This was asset protection at the highest level. This was someone who understood that in America, liability and ownership are everything. And if you separate the two correctly, you become untouchable. Multiple artists have hinted in interviews that when contracts were being negotiated, there was always someone else in the room, someone who had final say, someone who could approve or deny deals regardless of what Diddy said publicly. And when pressed, some have mentioned Janice by name. Mark Curry talked about contract issues. Mace walked away from millions. Carl Thomas, 112, Total, all of them left Bad Boy with similar stories. Control, exploitation, contracts that locked them in while funneling profits elsewhere. But who designed those contracts? Who enforced them? Who benefited most? Fans online have been studying corporate filings from Bad Boy's early years. They've traced ownership structures, they've compared public statements to legal documents, and they keep finding discrepancies, things that were credited to Diddy publicly but owned by others legally. And the name that keeps appearing? Janice Combs. She allegedly wasn't just a supportive mother, she was a silent partner, a hidden architect, the person who built the machine while Diddy performed for the cameras. Now let's talk about the money. Bad Boy's peak years reportedly generated hundreds of millions. Album sales, tours, publishing rights, merchandise. It was a juggernaut. But where did the money go? Artists say they didn't get their fair share. Diddy became a billionaire, but what about Janice? Sources claim she lived lavishly but quietly. Properties, investments, assets spread across multiple entities. She wasn't flashy like her son, but she allegedly controlled more, because she understood something Diddy was still learning. Real wealth is invisible. Real power is silent. And if the documentary footage 50 Cent has is real, if it shows financial documents, ownership structures, witness testimonies connecting Janice directly to Bad Boy's corporate decisions, then this isn't just a story about a supportive mother. This is a story about a woman who built an empire and let her son take all the credit and all the risk. That's not love. That's strategy. That's manipulation. That's using your own child as a shield while you operate in the shadows. Behind the power plays are the casualties nobody talks about. Artists left broke after making millions for the label. Women allegedly controlled, manipulated, and silenced through NDAs and fear. Families still mourning the 9 lives lost at City College, while nobody faced real accountability. And Cassie, whose story didn't emerge overnight. It took years of fear, silence, and survival before she could finally speak. That's somebody's daughter, somebody's sister, and she endured alleged abuse for years while the world celebrated the man inflicting it. That hits different when you realize she wasn't the first. She was just the first brave enough to go public. The women who came before her stayed silent, some by choice, some by force, some because they didn't think anyone would believe them. And if these patterns were inherited, not invented, if Diddy learned control and manipulation from watching his mother operate, then this isn't one man's downfall. This is a generational cycle of trauma disguised as success.
Think about the children who performed on that stage in Janice's living room. Think about the environment they were raised in. Think about what they learned was normal. Power dynamics, control, using people, discarding them when they're no longer useful. That's not accidental. That's learned behavior. That's conditioning. That's what happens when a child grows up watching adults treat people like assets instead of human beings. And now, Diddy's sons are defending him publicly, wearing free Diddy shirts, preparing their own documentary, standing by their father while the world watches his empire crumble. And the question haunting the internet is simple, but terrifying. Were they raised inside the same machine? Did they see the same things their father saw? Did they learn the same lessons? Did they absorb the same values? Or are they simply defending someone they love without understanding the full scope of what he allegedly did? Because that's the real tragedy here. It's not just about one man or one woman. It's about patterns that repeat. It's about trauma that gets passed down. It's about systems of control that don't die, they just find new hosts. The City College families never got closure. The artists never got their money. The women never got justice, and the cycle continues because nobody stops it. Nobody holds the right people accountable. Nobody looks at the person behind the person. We blame Diddy. We cancel Diddy. We prosecute Diddy. But if Janice was the architect, if she designed the system, taught the tactics, and profited from the destruction, then why isn't she facing the same scrutiny? That's what 50 Cent is allegedly trying to force into the public conversation. That's why Netflix supposedly refused to air it, because it's not just about exposing Diddy, it's about exposing the person who made him. And if that happens, if the world finally sees Janice not as a loving mother, but as a calculating strategist who used her son to build an empire of exploitation, then the entire narrative changes forever. 50 Cent claims Netflix saw this footage and ran. According to sources close to the production, the streaming giant reviewed early cuts of the documentary's second season. They saw uncut interviews, financial records, witnesses describing Janice's direct involvement in Bad Boy's operations, security testimony about City College, corporate trails allegedly placing assets under her name during critical periods, and allegedly recordings of phone calls where she's directing business operations while Diddy was the public face. And that they reportedly said no, not because it wasn't true, because it was too explosive, too legally complicated, too dangerous to air without facing potential lawsuits that could drag on for years. But 50 Cent isn't backing down. He's been vocal on social media, posting cryptic messages about the truth coming out and people hiding in plain sight. He's tagged Diddy repeatedly, he's referenced Janice directly, and he's made it clear this documentary is happening regardless of who tries to stop it. Then came the cease-and-desist letter, delivered to 50's legal team. Not a lawsuit, a threat. A warning to halt production or face legal consequences, but here's what makes that interesting. It wasn't filed as a defamation suit. It was a demand to halt release based on privacy concerns and unauthorized use of likeness. That's telling, because if the claims are false, the response is defamation. But if the claims are true and just uncomfortable, the response is exactly what we're seeing: legal pressure to silence without actually challenging the facts in court. And 50 responded publicly: "We're moving forward." 3 words that sent shockwaves through the industry, because it means he's willing to risk the legal battle. It means he believes the evidence is strong enough to survive scrutiny. It means this isn't a bluff. That silence from Diddy's camp after 50's response? Online investigators say it's deafening. Because if you're innocent, you fight back immediately. You sue for defamation. You provide evidence disproving the claims. You don't send cease-and-desist letters and hope it goes away quietly. Meanwhile, Diddy's sons rushed to announce their own documentary. Timing, convenient. Platform, friendly. Credibility, heavily questioned. Because it feels reactive. It feels damage control. It feels like an attempt to control the narrative before 50's version dominates the conversation. Fans online are already comparing this to other celebrity documentaries. Michael Jackson, R. Kelly, surviving versus defending, and history shows the version with the most evidence wins, not the version with the most loyalty. So what evidence does 50 allegedly have? Sources claim the footage includes interviews with former Bad Boy employees who witnessed Janice making executive decisions attributed publicly to Diddy. Financial analysts breaking down corporate ownership structures, showing her name on key documents. Security personnel from City College describing the chain of command that led to the tragedy. Former artists discussing contract negotiations where Janice had final approval. And allegedly recordings of phone calls where she's directing business operations while Diddy was the public face. If even half of that is real, it's game over for the current narrative. But there's more. Internet detectives have been doing their own investigations. They've found old interviews where Diddy credits his mother's business advice constantly. They've found clips where he says she taught him everything about negotiation and deal-making. They've found moments where he's publicly stated, fans have created entire YouTube channels dedicated to analyzing every public appearance Janice made during Bad Boy's peak years, her positioning at events, who she spoke to, how she carried herself. And they're finding patterns. She wasn't standing in the background like typical celebrity parents. She was front and center. She was networking. She was operating. One viral thread on Twitter mapped out every major Bad Boy business decision and cross-referenced it with Janice's known whereabouts at the time. And the correlation? Striking. Almost every major signing, every major deal, every major pivot in strategy happened shortly after events where Janice was present. Coincidence? Maybe, but the internet doesn't believe in coincidences anymore, not when patterns are this consistent. Then there's the financial angle. Multiple sources have pointed out that Janice's lifestyle never matched her publicly known income. Properties in multiple states, luxury vehicles, high-end fashion, private travel, all allegedly funded by what exactly? She wasn't the celebrity. She didn't have the contracts. She wasn't touring. So where was the money coming from? The obvious answer? It was coming from Bad Boy. But if it was just gifts from her son, why structure it through corporate entities? Why create complex financial arrangements instead of simple transfers? Unless the money was always hers. Unless she was always a partner, not a dependent. That's what the documentary allegedly proves, that Janice wasn't receiving money from Diddy. She was receiving profits from an empire she co-built, maybe even primarily built while letting him take the spotlight and the risk. And if that's what 50 Cent can prove with documents, testimonies, and footage, then this isn't just a scandal. This is a complete historical rewrite of one of hip-hop's most legendary success stories. The internet is ready, the anticipation is building, and the question everyone's asking is simple. When does it drop? Because the longer this builds, the more explosive the release will be. Let's talk about all the roads that lead back to the same place. City College, Cassie's overnight settlement, artists trapped in contracts for decades, alleged freak-offs that witnesses describe in disturbing detail, hidden cameras, power dynamics stretching back 30 years. Every single thread connects to the same core question: who really built this system? The City College tragedy alone should have ended everything. 9 people dead, families destroyed, a community traumatized. And the response? Quiet settlements, legal maneuvering, and a career that somehow not only survived, but thrived. How does that happen unless someone behind the scenes knows exactly how to manage crises, contain liability, and keep building regardless of consequences? Cassie's lawsuit was settled in 24 hours. That's not normal. That's not how litigation works unless someone is desperate to keep details from becoming public. And the settlement amount? Reportedly massive. The kind of money you pay when you absolutely cannot afford to go to trial, when you cannot risk discovery, when you cannot let a jury hear what witnesses might say. And who allegedly advised that settlement? Who reportedly pushed for immediate resolution regardless of cost? Sources say it was the same person who's been managing crises for decades: Janice Combs.
Then there's the artists. Mark Curry's been vocal for years about contract exploitation. Mace walked away from a $20 million deal rather than stay under Bad Boy's control. Carl Thomas, 112, Total, Dream, Ganity Kane, all of them have similar stories. Promises made, promises broken, money earned, money never paid, and the same contract structure is keeping them locked in while profits float elsewhere. Who designed those contracts? Entertainment lawyers, sure, but who approved them? Who enforced them? Who benefited most when artists stayed trapped? Because Diddy made money from their work, but if Janice owned the corporate entities holding those contracts, she made money too. Quietly, consistently, without any public scrutiny. The alleged freak-offs have become a central part of the federal case against Diddy. Witnesses describe elaborate events, coercion, recording without consent, distribution of footage as leverage and control. That's not spontaneous behavior. That's systematic. That's calculated. That's someone operating with the confidence that they're protected from consequences. And where does that confidence come from? From knowing someone has your back, someone who's managed crises before, someone who knows how to make problems disappear, someone who's been doing it successfully for decades. Online investigators have mapped out every public scandal Diddy's faced: the nightclub shooting with Jennifer Lopez, the assault cases, the contract disputes, the artist complaints. And in almost every case, the outcome is the same: quiet settlement, non-disclosure agreements, public narrative controlled, crisis contained. That's not luck. That's infrastructure. That's having systems in place to handle problems before they become catastrophic. And who built those systems? Who maintains them? Who's been the constant presence through every era of Bad Boy's existence? Janice Combs. She's been there through every phase, every scandal, every success, every crisis. And she's always managed to stay out of the spotlight while allegedly maintaining control behind the scenes. That's not accidental. That's intentional. That's someone who understands power dynamics at the highest level. Fans online have started calling her the invisible CEO, the person who ran everything while letting someone else take the credit and the blame. And if the documentary proves that's accurate, it changes everything we thought we knew about Bad Boy, about Diddy, and about how power really operates in the music industry. Because this isn't just about one family. It's about how many other empires are structured the same way, how many other celebrity success stories have hidden architects operating in the shadows, how many other self-made moguls are actually fronts for someone else's vision and strategy. That's the bigger conversation this documentary could spark, not just about Diddy and Janice, but about the entire industry, about how power is really distributed, about who really owns what, about who really controls who. And that's why this matters beyond gossip, beyond drama, beyond celebrity scandal. Because if we're not asking who's really in charge, we're missing the whole story. This isn't just hip-hop gossip. This is a case study in unchecked power and how empires are really built. If the allegations are true, it proves something disturbing. Success stories we celebrate are often more complex and darker than we realize. The rags to riches narrative we love to repeat, sometimes it's cover for manipulation, exploitation, and control systems designed by people we never even see. Janice allegedly understood something fundamental about American capitalism. Liability and ownership are everything. If you can separate the two, you become nearly untouchable. You put the fame and risk on someone else. You keep the control and profits for yourself. And you operate in the shadows while the world watches the person you positioned as the face. That's not just smart, that's ruthless. And it raises a terrifying question. How many other empires were built the same way? How many other celebrity moguls are actually fronts for someone else's operation? How many other self-made success stories involve hidden partners who designed the whole system? How many other families operate like corporations, with one person taking public risk while another holds private control? The music industry has always had stories about puppet masters, managers who control artists, labels that own masters, executives who exploit talent while accumulating wealth. But what if it goes deeper? What if some of the most powerful figures we think we know are actually being controlled by people we've never even considered? That's what this documentary could expose, not just about Diddy, but about an entire system of power that operates invisibly while we focus on the celebrities performing for cameras. And there's another layer, the responsibility of motherhood. Society expects mothers to protect, nurture, and guide their children toward healthy futures. But what happens when a mother sees her child as a vehicle for her own ambitions? What happens when maternal influence becomes manipulation? What happens when the person who should protect you is actually using you? That's a conversation nobody wants to have, because it challenges something sacred, the idea of unconditional maternal love, the belief that mothers always want what's best for their children. But if Janice allegedly built her son into a brand, managed him like a corporate asset, and used him as a shield while operating behind the scenes, then that's not love. That's exploitation disguised as family loyalty. And if Diddy is facing consequences now for patterns he learned from her, if his behavior is inherited rather than invented, then where's her accountability? Why isn't she facing the same scrutiny? Why isn't the public asking what role she played in creating the system everyone's now trying to dismantle? Those are uncomfortable questions, questions that challenge our assumptions about family, success, and power, questions that force us to look at who we celebrate and why, questions that make us reconsider stories we accepted without investigation. And that's exactly why this documentary matters. Because if we're only holding visible figures accountable, while invisible architects continue operating untouched, we're not actually changing anything. We're just replacing one front person with another, while the real power structure remains intact. If Season 2 drops with the footage 50 Cent is teasing, the fallout will be nuclear. Reputations built over decades will evaporate overnight. Legacies carefully constructed through PR and image management will be rewritten. Silence that protected powerful people for years will finally shatter, and the person who's managed to stay out of the spotlight while allegedly controlling everything, she won't be able to hide anymore. Janice Combs may have operated in the shadows successfully for 30 years, but if this documentary provides evidence connecting her directly to bad boys' operations, to artist exploitation, to crisis management strategies, to corporate structures designed to shield her from liability, then the shadows disappear. Then the spotlight moves. Then the questions shift from what did Diddy do to who taught him, who enabled him, who profited from his actions while staying invisible. And those questions don't have comfortable answers. The internet is already preparing. Fan investigators have created detailed timelines ready to cross-reference with whatever the documentary reveals. Legal analysts are standing by to break down corporate documents if they're released. Former industry insiders are ready to provide context and confirmation if the evidence supports their private suspicions. This isn't just going to be a documentary release. This is going to be a cultural moment, a reckoning, a complete dismantling of a narrative the industry has protected for decades. And the timing? It's devastating. Federal trial approaching, civil suits pending, witnesses cooperating, evidence mounting. Diddy's already facing his fight of his life, and now his mother might be dragged into the spotlight, facing questions she's avoided her entire career. Can she survive that scrutiny? Can her reputation withstand the kind of investigation Diddy is currently facing? Can she explain decades of financial arrangements, corporate structures, and operational involvement while maintaining she was just a supportive mother? The internet doesn't think so. Online sentiment has already shifted. Comment sections are brutal. Theories are everywhere. And public opinion? It's turning. People are starting to ask the right questions. They're starting to look at the person behind the person. They're starting to demand accountability from everyone involved, not just the most visible figure. And if the documentary delivers what 50 Cent is promising, if it provides documents, testimonies, and footage that definitively prove Janice was more than a mother, if it shows she was an architect, a strategist, a partner, maybe even the primary force behind Bad Boy's success and its methods, then history will remember her completely differently. Not as the devoted mother who supported her son's dreams, but as the mastermind who used her son to build an empire while staying protected from consequences. Not as a victim of circumstance, but as a calculator of strategy who understood exactly what she was doing and did it anyway. That's the stakes. That's what's coming. That's why this matters, beyond gossip.